As mentioned in Chapter 28, the following events coincided with my marriage to Osad, but I separated them to prevent confusion. I believe that the aliens didn't intervene because while it was occurring, I wasn't under any distress. My vital signs would indicate that I was simply asleep. You've probably heard that abductees have implants. It monitors our vital signs and is a location detector. It also serves as a QRS code, which is of alien technology. Within just a few months of our marriage, premonitions began that I would injure myself. I tended to know things before they happened. Sure enough, I fell, twisting my right ankle and fracturing my foot. At first, the doctor wrapped it and placed a splint until the swelling subsided. He would later place a hard cast. The slightest movement caused great pain. One night, I decided to sleep with the splint off and just prop the foot up, or was I given the impression to do so? During the night, I was picked up by the gray beings. I became aware they were standing at the foot of the gurney examining my foot. One came around to my right and radiated sympathy towards me. Early that morning, I awoke with my foot throbbing in some serious agonizing pain. Later, with my foot in a permanent cast, they picked me up again. Laying on their gurney, I came to realize that two small grays were tugging at the cast like it was a boot. Over and over in my mind, I informed my captors, "It doesn't come off. It doesn't come off." One walked around to my right and let me know that he didn't understand. He wanted me to explain. I envisioned in my mind how a vibrating machine would be used to open and remove the cast. With no memory of the abduction, the next day an irrational panic set in. My heart suddenly raced and I felt trapped with the cast ensnaring my leg. I even considered cutting myself free of it. Fortunately, I was able to calm myself down. After 6 weeks, it was time for the cast to be removed. I was surprised to see my right leg so shriveled. Hobbling back into my apartment on crutches, I sensed their watchfulness, knowing there would be an exam that night. Like I said before, injuries and illnesses will guarantee an abduction. It has occurred to me that the energy of sympathy that the alien being radiated towards me was too canned. It wasn't natural. It was more like he ran a program called sympathy. Many abductees, my sister included, have reported the aliens eliciting emotion from them while staring into their eyes. What if by staring into the abductee's eyes, they can capture the energetic and vibrational imprint of emotion as a download that can be played back to us later? In other words, when they radiate an emotion to us, like love or sympathy, it is simply a program of that emotion. Is this why they are so interested in human emotions and in evoking them? Osad and I moved back into my small house where I had first noticed bizarre activity. It's where I saw the monkey-like creature and became scared to sleep in my room. It's the house where the men in black made their appearance. This is where I was living when I joined MUFON and the abductee support group, mentioned in the introduction. In February 1992, Troy had introduced me to his childhood friend involved in MUFON, and I joined their abductee support group. I had my first session with a renowned investigator. It went something like this: "Why would they pick you up and not someone else?" After some thought, I replied, "I don't know, because I belong to them?" When he asked me if I believed in reincarnation, I was adamant, "Certainly not. People who believe in reincarnation are kooks. They make it all up." Now I wonder why the investigator even asked me about reincarnation. Did he know or maybe suspect something? I soon learned he considered himself the alien's sworn enemy, and the feelings were mutual. They tend to respond in kind. When asked about special abilities, I told them about making the 8-track tape fly out at my first husband. When I asked the therapist if he was an abductee, he responded that he was, and I smiled, feeling a sense of affinity. Then I noted the assistant, a very kind woman and the wife of my brother's friend. I asked if she was an abductee. When he replied that she wasn't, an unexpected rush of fear swept over me. Why had this alarmed me? Something must be there for me to have reacted this way. The therapist left me with the suggestion that I will begin to remember more concerning my abductions, and I did. During an abduction soon after meeting the therapist, I am asked by the being working on me how I felt about this guy. My response was that he was nice and I liked him. When I projected these feelings of like, the being objected. He disagreed with my esteem. He impressed on me to place a repulsive image in my mind and associate that image with the investigator. In earlier writings about this, I had written that he placed the image in my mind, but that is not exactly what they do. They make the suggestion, but you provide the essential missing piece. For example, I am someone you know and love. A vision of a relative comes to mind. Imagine something that is gross. Another image comes to mind. A quick association or transference of the emotion can then be made from one object to the other. If you understand neuro-linguistic programming, then you have an idea of how the aliens manipulate human emotions, when needed. Although I am sure they don't call it neuro-linguistic programming. And again, their communications are not with words, but with impressions. Anyway, this image turned me off, so I said, "Oh, I guess I don't really like him after all." Although I did not immediately recall this incident, my feelings for the investigator changed, although not to repulsion. Other abductees would report similar programming of dislike and suspicion of their investigators. The abductees were soon divided up between two investigators, and we were told to keep a journal. The following are taken from journal entries. July 26, 1992. Mine and my sister's hypnosis appointment with Daryl Sims was at 1:30. I told my husband that I was going to my mother's. He doesn't like for me to pursue alien stuff. The hypnosis induction was very interesting. Since Judy was visiting from Arkansas, I let her go first, and I was allowed to watch. When he told her to go to her very first event, tears began streaming down her face. He asked her how big she was, and she said, "Tiny," and held out her hands to show the size. To everyone's amazement, she had gone to her birth. When asked who was present, she said that our mother was there and 4 other people in the room. "I am being born," she said through her tears. The doctor had something funny on his head and something funny on his face. It seemed to frighten her until the adult Judy realized he was wearing glasses. Several abduction events were covered, which are already in this book. While heading home, we stopped for gas. Judy got out and walked past the metal dispenser for ice bags. One of the doors began shaking violently. It frightened her. She ran and told the cashier that she believed someone must be inside. There wasn't. This is an example of a psychic phenomenon related to abduction events, and obviously can be triggered even by undergoing hypnosis related to abduction. Judy has had other poltergeist type of events when upset, just like I have. Judy became troubled by feelings of guilt for having spoken with the investigator. She felt that she had been lying. She was afraid that the videotape would get out and her identity would be known. She never wanted to undergo hypnosis again. She says that she cried back to Arkansas. Judy and her family still lived in what we jokingly called Rock Bottoms, Arkansas. She told how one day her husband was watching television and the governor of Arkansas was speaking, a young Bill Clinton. "See that man there?" she had said. "You watch. Someday he's going to be president." Her husband replied that there was no way a governor of Arkansas could become president. A few years later, when Clinton's problems first began, she said to me, "They are going to try to impeach this president." There was a faint memory of a small gray being passing through the bathroom door and rushing toward me. Many of my abductions occur when I sleepily go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. This way, when I return, I simply think that I am coming back from the bathroom. MUFON is having a Meet the Abductees event next month. I have got to be there. They are going to show some video of hypnosis sessions with abductees and have some of the abductees up front for questions from the audience. I can't wait. I have made a few new friends through attending the MUFON abductees support group meetings. The meetings are at various homes and known only to other abductees who will be attending. Somewhere around this time, I remember being on a table as a being is working on me. I become aware enough to ask him about the hybrid children. Are they being made so they can take care of us? His answer was a shocked and adamant no. Then he offered, as if it was a no-brainer, "You are their parents." I had asked because one of the abductees had suggested it. Aliens do not share information on their agenda with us humans. They simply do not. I always suspect a contactee as being full of it. When I arrived at my investigator's house, the video was already set up. The circumstance surrounding Roy's car accident was what had driven me to this, so naturally this was what I wanted to cover. Not really under hypnosis, I told the story as I consciously recalled it. But when I came to the point of standing at the road after the accident occurred, I realized that the beings were standing in the woods, watching me. At this, my breathing became distressed, and I fought to hold back a wrenching emotional pain that welled up inside me. Tears flowed. "They're in the woods," I blurted out. This was replaced by a feeling of overwhelming anger. I kept saying, "I'm angry, I'm angry." I fought reliving the experience and had difficulty proceeding. The next event we attempted was the night at the schoolhouse. Lying relaxed on the couch, I again began telling what I recalled consciously leading up to the event. I have found that just talking about the experience while being relaxed helps to recall forgotten aspects. I described how the large yellow moon descended behind the school and 3 frightening creatures ran toward us as we were frozen. The ground moved beneath me as I was floated forward by the creature holding me by my left upper arm. My mind went blank as the me experiencing the abduction went unconscious. Unable to move forward with the event, I relaxed even deeper and took a sigh. Suddenly my head snaps to the right, becoming engrossed in looking at the 3 of us standing at the end of the hall. The investigator asked, "What just happened?" Hearing his voice distracted me. "Who is he?" "Oh yeah." Trying to comply with his question, I strained my eyes upward, searching for the language part of my brain. My once smooth rendition now came haltingly as I worked to formulate the sentences. We are standing at the end of the hall," I replied, as I struggled to form the word in my brain and speak them. I had trouble with the pronunciation of my sister's name. "I see one stand in front of Jude. He," I added. "You see one stand in front of Judy," he clarified. "Yes, I see one stand in front of Jude. He." More remarkable still was how heavy and doughy I felt, like an encasement of clay. A very odd feeling indeed. "What is this?" I thought as I looked down with a yucky expression, eyes closed of course. At the point in hypnosis when I returned to the body, my out-of-body experience was immediately forgotten. As Jennifer was lying on the couch, I did not recall having been out of the body. The memory was gone. While reliving the out-of-body experience as the spirit, I was compelled not to expose myself to the therapist. He never knew what was really happening. He was taping the experience and my reactions, snap of head, yucky face, halting speech, but had felt that since nothing important occurred, he later taped over my session. I know, right? On December 8th through the 9th, 1992, upon awakening, there was an image in my mind of a naked man lying on a gurney next to me. Wouldn't it be embarrassing if a group of us was taken to a room and we had no clothes on? I thought. Getting up, I brushed it aside. Nah, it didn't happen. As I made my way to the bathroom, I remembered dreaming of my deceased brother, Roy, but Roy had strange eyes. Looking into the mirror and blowing my nose, there was blood in my left nostril. I knew then that something unusual had happened. This is what I recalled. That night, my husband had fallen asleep on the living room floor while watching television. I had gone to bed in the adjacent room. I became aware of a massive ship over the top of my house. It was big enough to have consumed the entire sky. I could physically feel the weight and density of it over my house, and I could see it in my mind's eye as if looking up through my ceiling, with that natural remote viewing ability I have had all my life. In a trance, I walked past my husband and out the side door. A gray being met me in our driveway. He stands aside as a blue beam of light shines down from the dark sky and encircles me. Meanwhile, I am facing my neighbor's house and their bedroom window. I considered the absurdity of such a scene, an otherworldly being in my driveway as I stand in my gown inside a blue beam of light. I thought, if they were to look out their window and see this, they really would think I was weird. And on some level, I knew I was being beamed up to heaven. Next, 2 smaller grays brought me up an elevator into a large room. The grays looked at each other like, this is big trouble. The elevator doors closed behind me as my escorts leave, and I am left standing alone. I notice a large metal machine object to my right. I think that it might be a car, but, on some level, I know it is not. Ahead of me is a raised floor maybe 4 foot high, with a side rail and a ramp coming down the right. There were 3 beings up there, and the larger is angrily confronting the other 2 regarding exposure of their presence among us humans. He noticed me standing near the elevators. "And there's another one," he pointed out. I was not dressed, and it took him a moment as he did a quick mental process to determine if I was male or female. "Bring her over here," he demanded. He intended to use me to make his case as he reprimanded the others. They refused to say, "No, we can't do that," as if they were following other orders regarding our handling. This frustrated him even further, but he couldn't call their bluff and override their instructions. Telepathically, someone was called to retrieve me. I saw a very tall being approaching from the right, from around behind the ramp. Because he is tall, and since I am thinking that I have gone to heaven, I imagine that it is my brother, Roy. Wasn't it nice of Roy to come and greet me? This Roy has strange eyes. They are bright blue or green with a slit. Roy had green eyes. He is indifferent. I say, "So this is where we go when we die." I was glad to be with Roy, but what about my sister Judy? She would be devastated. I needed to reassure her. Still thinking I was in heaven, I asked, "Can we communicate with people from up here?" He was puzzled at my question, but nods. "Yes." I was glad, but then got upset. "Then how come you never tried to contact us?" He is puzzled again, but brushes my odd comment aside and leads me off to a short right. Walking, I notice that this heaven has a lot of chrome. Our destination is a waiting area, and he seats me against the wall just inside the door. There are other people present and sitting in this room. I think that we are waiting to be processed for entry into heaven. A large being sits in a chair in the center of the room. Like a guard, he watches over us. Other people are against the wall beside me and against the wall across the room. I see a couple, DT and wife LT from our support group, sitting shoulder to shoulder. There are a lot of things going on outside of this room, which to me seemed long and narrow. Others reported it as round. Suddenly someone rushed into the room through the door I had entered and squatted behind the guard's chair. This person was scared. I believe this to be KW from the support group. The guard leans around his right shoulder and thinks to chastise him out from behind his chair, but with a certain satisfaction he senses the young man's fear and decides to let him stay. Hunger pains cause me to wonder if we would be getting anything to eat. The guard picked up on this, and I imagine that I am given silverware to hold in anticipation of some future meal. This did not sit right in my mind. You don't sit and hold utensils. So the utensils disappeared. They didn't really exist. Through another entry from the far left, a child came and got on its knees facing the guard in the chair. I imagine that it is playing with something on the floor. On some level I sensed something was not quite right. This child's presence began disturbing me. Someone is called to retrieve the child, and I think it is the parents. From the far left entry, they called the child's name. The child responded, and the 2 beings escorted off to the right. The actual name called, I was to learn only later, was my friend from the support group, Leslie. She too had sensed she was in heaven, so thought the guard was God sitting upon his throne. She was seeing a beautiful man as through a cloud. She got on her knees before him and, feeling unworthy, said something like, "I'm sorry for every bad thing I have ever done. Please forgive me for all my sins." He responded with, "My child, that is what they teach you, but that is not what we want," then added, "It's okay. I will always be with you now." Again, I think of how my sister must be devastated to lose me. It seems someone left at this point to go get her. Then I look up and she is sitting across from me. Gosh, we are here together. I hope I wasn't driving and killed us both. I wouldn't want to be responsible for her death. "Was I driving?" I asked her. She answered, "No, I was driving in a parking lot and hit a pole. It was really weird." "Did Roy come to greet you too? Wasn't that nice of him?" I asked. She said, "Well, somebody did, but I don't think it was really Roy because he had strange eyes." So, I think about that. Why would Roy have strange eyes? So, I tell her that maybe it was normal that he would have different eyes now that he came here. I would be sure to ask him later. I don't know if Judy was really there or I imagined it. One role of the center being was to cater to our hallucinations to keep us pacified. But also, the aliens were doing a type of damage control because we had become aware of their presence. They were casting a wide net to get a handle on it. Next, we are all instructed to stand. We are herded left toward the far back entry and turn left, the opposite direction the child was taken. I find myself laying on a gurney. Turning my head to the right, I see a large man on the gurney next to me, and he is naked. In my altered state, this does not faze me a bit. This was DT, and this image was to stick with me upon awakening. It did not occur to me that I was also not wearing clothes. There were 2 rows of gurneys, each row against opposite walls. The foot of both rows faced each other, and between the 2 was a walk space. Besides each gurney was a small surgical table with instruments. On each gurney lay a victim. Across from me, I believe, was another female friend, RP, having also met her through the abductee support group. From the right, entered a being whose job it was to question each of us. He zigzagged between a gurney on his right to one on his left as he made his way down this aisle. Picking up on his thoughts, he was very briefly asking each their purpose for being in the MUFON abductee support group. If he met even slight hesitation, he posed his own answer. They were meeting for emotional support, to which the abductee would agree, which wasn't very smart on his part. This was the answer he expected to find, and so did find all along the way. After our mini debriefing, beings performed a surgical procedure on each of us using the tray at our side. I recall having an instrument inserted into my left nasal cavity. With all completed, each was given a thick, brown, and flat-tasting drink. I watched as the man beside me was sat up and drank his. Then he was escorted off to the right, having an accident onto the floor along the way, which embarrassed him. This was quickly cleaned up by another being. Next, I was given my drink and was escorted right. I found myself in a shower-type stall, and it felt wonderfully refreshing. I do not believe what came out of the shower was water, but it performed some sort of antibacterial cleansing. A gray waited outside the stall as I went through the motions of taking a shower. The next morning, my husband found our door leading to the driveway unlocked and standing open, and I found blood in my nose. This event turned out to be the mass abduction of the MUFON abductee support group. It was triggered when one of the abductees told her captors, "Daryl Sims knows what you're doing." The master hypnotherapist had intentionally implanted this message in her subconscious mind. The next time she was abducted, she was to deliver the message to the aliens. It sparked a full-scale mass abduction by the aliens. Friends and family were even being abducted and screened for what they knew. When the mass abduction of the support group was announced at a meeting, a terrible fear went through me. I already knew that I had been involved. The abductee support group was kept apart until each one could be debriefed and undergo hypnosis. Investigations were happening on both sides now. One thing that came out of this mass abduction was the idea of an alien coalition, because so many different aliens were seen to be interacting. During my post-mass abduction hypnosis session, I must confess there was a great deal of raw emotion when I recalled the questioning being leaning into my face. Viewing one's reactions under hypnosis will give one a new perspective on how one really feels in the presence of the aliens, and that is terror. Whenever a hypnosis session put me near one of the aliens, there was always overwhelming grief and dread. I cannot explain the reason for this. A feeling of heaviness begins in my chest and my breathing becomes labored. I begin to weep and tears start flowing. It's horrible. About my friend Leslie, initials LC, her action in front of the being had made him uncomfortable, but at the same time, he felt compassion for her. She had suffered a head injury as a child. After a fall from a horse, she woke up in a field with her nose bleeding. From this, they believe, she developed a pituitary tumor, which caused her to remain sexually undeveloped. In a way, she is forever a child. For years, she suffered severe headaches. Her brothers were cruel to her growing up. During one of her events that she related to me, her family was seated around the dinner table. Leslie watched through the kitchen window as several ships came in. Suddenly, several beings appeared inside her home. One of the beings was a beautiful Nordic type. He called her to him and stood with hands on her shoulders facing the family while he gently chastised them for mistreating her. Then he said that Leslie was blessed and that someday she would help show the world. Then he turned her towards him, and with his hands still on her shoulders, he radiated love for her. She remembers watching the ships leave in the sky and recalls how lonely she felt. After the family came around, one of the brothers commented how maybe they shouldn't pick on Leslie so much. Maybe her being so sick meant there was something special about her. The other brother scoffed at this, and the mistreatment continued. It was her husband who years later got her the treatment she needed, and he was with her when she was allowed to give him a restricted tour of the ship. She remembers pointing to some symbols on the wall and read it to him. It said, "Treasure your soul, for it is your most valuable possession." She drew these symbols for me, and I have included them here. Is this book with her symbols the someday the alien referred to? I cannot help but notice how the symbol for man has no arms. It implies helplessness, impotency to defend oneself, or maybe reflects the alien's control over us. During the tour of the ship, she also recalled seeing a beautiful blue triangle that she started to touch. This startled the alien, who instructed her not to touch it, saying, "It is not time for that yet." The alien who appeared at my friend's kitchen table may not truly have been Nordic in appearance. It is possible that reports of beautiful blonde Nordic men and women are simply screen images. Remember, she saw the alien in the chair during the mass abduction as a beautiful godlike figure. This is an older woman with strong Christian beliefs, even still. Many abductees are very religious, and many are drudges of society. Status and morality make no difference. Another abductee friend called one day to say that she had been persistently asking the aliens why they were picking her up. She had a vision where a symbol slowly descended in front of her fireplace. It was a check mark with a line under it, sort of like one checks off a grocery list. Abductees are frequently told they belong to them, and this is how she took the message. They are also frequently told that they were chosen, which I think is meant to appeal to the all-too-human ego of being special. Being an abductee is not some accomplishment one is to be proud of, because it is not something you did. This concludes Chapter 29. In the next chapter, I will share alien encounters from my journal, taken in 1993. It includes an encounter with men in black and the mysterious and notorious black helicopters. You can see why this book is a must-have for all alien abduction researchers. Help get this channel found by giving the video a like and leaving a comment.